Hey guys, so lots of changes for this video here. We're applying clean infrastructure to our code. Um, so before we get into it, I want to talk about the summary of clean architecture and how it relates to our code base. So it's basically a software design um, architecture or structure that helps enforces separation of concerns throughout your code. So it does add more complexity in terms of the amount of code and projects you have to add. But in turn, it helps as your code grows into a bigger application. It kind of, because they're separated, it helps to unit test it and also add new features or remove as well. So just a simple summary for that. So our presentation layer is our console app. Our application layer is going to hold our contracts, our models, and our services. So our services is going to be more of our business logic for our program. And then it's going to call whatever interface it wants to perform the service that we're going to add for the app. Our core is going to be the class model that we're going to use to insert into the DB and basically more of how the DB is structured. And then the infrastructure is going to be our DB context, our repositories. Okay, so first we want to, first for our program.cs, we can walk through the code and then kind of see the updates and then how it relates to all of the projects that we added. So here I added this JSON app settings, and this is just where we keep the URL for the NBA stats that we're going to keep. So that's going to be in our configuration. And then here, since we're using clean architecture, we're also going to apply dependency injection to our app. So which then we have to add the lifetime of our services and repositories of our application that we're going to use. So my configuration is going to be a singleton because that's not going to change unless we do make a change to the URL or we add something else in there. But since that isn't going to be a change while the app is running, that's going to be a lifetime, or that's going to be for the scope of the entire lifetime of the application. This is going to be our context to our SQLite DB, our repository that fetches the data through the web. So we're using the add HTTP client for this repo, and then our repository to save the data, and then our scoped service for our game service that kind of ties the business all together. So now that we've built everything as a prereq here, we're going to get our service that we need for our app, our game service, and then we're going to call our method to sync the games from the web and then save it to our SQLite DB. So we can go in here. So our game service is on the application layer, and so we're going to inject our interfaces that we need that relate to the service. So in this case, fetching data, and then our game repository is the one that saves the data. So we only have one method here, and so we're going to first call this interface, which is the interface that is implemented through our class here. And so let me go just take a step back so we can see how this all works. So we're at the game service. We inject today's game fetcher. Today's game fetcher interface has fetched today's games over here, and then our repository that that will fetch the games implements that interface. So then this class that we have, we've injected the HTTP client and also the URL for the JSON. So in our constructor, when we're instantiating the HTTP client, we're also adding the configuration that we built as a prereq in our constructor, and then we're calling our schedule leak JSON property from the JSON. So now when we call this class and then call this method to fetch today's game, we're just gonna use the HTTP client to get a stream of the URL that we have from the JSON, and we're gonna deserialize it with our model that we have in our core. So these are all what we spoke about on part 1 of this video. I'm just adding a layer of clean architecture into the mix of what we built before, because before it was more of like a scripting way of how to do it. So again, we're getting those games from that API request, and then we're only getting today's games. And then from there, we're looping through those games if we have any, and then adding it into our list. And then we're going to return back the today's games. Whether it's empty or not, we're going to return back today's games, a list of the game DTO. So once we go to our service, now our data is just the data that's coming from this method. So see how we're applying the separation of concerns where we don't have all the code in the program.cs. We're saying that this interface and the classes that implement that interface are only going to do things that we tell it to. So unlike in the program.cs, a lot of code relies on the previous code, whereas in this case, we're saying that this interface only is subject to what we're telling it to do, and that's only to fetch the games. So then we're going to apply our business logic into the application layer, which is from our game service. And our business logic is just simple, but it says if the count of the objects of that list is greater than 0, then we're going to run our save method from our game repository to save the data to our SQLite. And then if not, no games are found. So again, to apply the separation of concerns, our today's game repository doesn't care about saving the data at all. All it worries about is simply getting the data and giving that to the service. And then our application layer is the one that has the business logic to say, well, if the data that you gave me has a count greater than 0, then apply the save using the game repository. To see we're separating the concerns here. So now if we go to here, right, we're using our game repository, our game repository interface, and our interface has our method here, which is the same naming conventions as our repository that implements this interface. And in this class, we're injecting the application DB context because we depend on that context so that we can insert the data that we received through this method to the SQLite DB. So yeah, we go here, we call that interface, run that method, and then within the method, we're passing in the data that we fetched. And then we're sending that over to loop through each of the games and then adding it to our context and then saving it. So then that will do all of the inserts for us when we run the code. Oh, now we can run the code and we can see this all together. So if I run, so let's take a look at our DB. So if I, where's my refresh button? Oh, here it is. So there's no data in here. Now if I were to run this, okay, all right, finished. So if I refresh data here, we see our games. Okay, all right, so that's clean architecture for this application. My next video, we'll talk about exception handling and how to do that in a more appropriate way so that we can bubble up the exception. So that's what we'll go through after, and then probably the next video we'll run some unit tests. And then I think after that, we'll create our second application, and that's to create the injury report getter as well. See you guys then. And then, oh, if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know. I'll respond back. Thanks, bye.